been asking me a lot about why I'm so skeptical of Clair Obscur, why I've been so vocal about this being an AstroTurf product, why I don't take it seriously at all, why I don't respect any gaming YouTuber or journo hyping this up as the next big thing. The short answer is, quite simply, is that I play more RPGs than these people. I know more about them. I respect the genre more. I know more about the industry. And I'm far more familiar with like the tactics that the West uses to prop up their own inferior nonsense. 20 years ago, I remember this very well. I know plenty of other people remember this as well. The narrative was that Japanese RPGs weren't real RPGs. This was something that was used to hype up companies like BioWare and Larian and Ultima. This idea that these open world games that were more mature and more rooted in traditional tabletop formulas were superior to Japanese RPGs because they were closer to like the D&D experience. Never mind that Japanese gaming had evolved the formula, had adapted better to the video game format, and had created like far more engaging storylines and characters than had ever been produced in the West. The narrative at the time was that Japanese RPGs needed to be taken down a peg in order to promote like more westernized products. They instead decided to start equating their material to stuff that the Japanese do. So instead of being better than the JRPGs, they are the JRPGs. So like it's if you can't beat them, join them kind of situation. Like you've seen something similar in the anime community, right? Where Netflix takes their original animations produced in the West by people like Adi Shankar and people like that, and then like present them as authentic anime. And like anybody in the actual community will be able to tell you like what's an authentic anime and what's not just by like the association and the culture. But like normies seem to genuinely have this mindset that like anime is more of a genre than like simply a description of where the animation is from. So instead of like so they see anime as being like more mature, story-driven animation instead of being just animation from Japan. And this is like, a complete misconception of like what anime actually is. And it's coming from plebs, but like this is a misconception that has been like just pushed among the general public for a long time because, general consumers have been learning not to trust Western creators because all of them are hacks. None of them can produce anything of value whatsoever. The animation is trash. The writing is trash. The characters aren't memorable. The only reason these shows have any following at all is simply because they are our shows, right? They don't really have anything going for them at all. These are the shows that like are like marketed towards us, that are supposed to be like made for our sensibilities, but in reality, what's happening, and more people are becoming aware of this all the time, like they are just propaganda, right? We've seen this time and time again with all of these shows and like games and movies that are like shoved down our throats that have no real following at all. It's an attempt at social conditioning Americans into believing certain things about the world and society. Clair Obscur, I think, is the video game equivalent of that. An obviously AstroTurf product that has no real redeeming qualities at all, that is not a JRPG, and yet is promoted as one. And if you look at the marketing material and you look at what like IGN is saying, and when you look at what all these YouTubers are saying, this is supposedly one of the best JRPGs ever made, even though it can't be considered a JRPG because it is not a Japanese product. Again, they seem to misappropriate JRPG as a genre instead of simply a descriptor of where the RPG is made. The JRPG label was initially invented to downplay RPGs made in Japan and now is being weaponized in a different way. Like, we are the JRPG. These kind of situations are becoming more and more common, but as they happen more and more, I am seeing more and more pushback towards them. Like Astrobot fell apart in a couple of months. Baldur's Gate 3 didn't stay relevant for very long. Black Myth Wukong fell off. There's all these examples of just all these really forced products that are just shoved down our throats by the gaming media, like expecting us to worship them. Cyberpunk 2077, games like No Man's Sky, Undertale, like Celeste. There's just all these examples of mediocre products that we're just supposed to consider to be better than the all-time greats, right? That's been the trend lately, is just comparing these mediocre knockoff products to like these all-time classics and saying that like, well, this game is better actually. But like, this tactic doesn't work if the people saying this aren't actual fans of the games. Like when I see people like praising Clair Obscur, are these people who like play Final Fantasy VI? Are these people who know anything about JRPGs? Do they play Shin Megami Tensei or Dragon Quest or Tales? Like, what do they play really? In fact, considering like they seem to think JRPG means turn-based, they wouldn't consider Tales to be a JRPG at all. These people don't know anything about the kind of game they claim to be fans of. If you were a fan of Japanese RPGs, you would know dozens and dozens of games that are better than Clair Obscur. You wouldn't be falling all over yourself trying to call it a 10 out of 10 and one of the best games ever made, because you would have had dozens of experiences with other games that you like more than that. You would have preferences, you would have ideas, and you would know full well that you can't take what normies say about Japanese RPGs all that seriously, because they don't know the first thing about them. IGN praising Clair Obscur as one of the best JRPGs games of all time. This doesn't get me fired up to play Clair Obscur. It doesn't make me interested in seeing what it is or learning more about it. Like, to me, this kind of thing is nothing more than a gigantic red flag. This to me is just proof that this game is being forced, that it's not all that impressive, that it's not all that good. It's just another example of developers trying to undermine the good games that are being made and released on Nintendo consoles in order to like overhype some nonsense that nobody is going to remember or talk about 5 years from now. We saw it with Hi-Fi Rush, we saw it with Baldur's Gate, and now we're seeing it with Clair Obscur. This game is doomed to obscurity.